The Peaky Blinders Netflix series was on my to-watch list for many moons, but when the year changed from 2025 to 2026, one of my best pals, Reggie Rat, bellowed at me via text that the time to watch is now, as the, at that point, forthcoming cinematic follow-up was set to arrive in a couple months. This television show instantly gripped me, so I was able to rip through the 6 seasons, each of them containing 6 episodes, which average out to just under 60 minutes apiece, within a pretty concise time frame. And mind you, I will be dropping a review of this entire series quite soon. I just wanted to assure to upload my review of its limited theatrical sequel prior to the movie's Netflix release. Now, there were some narrative loose ends by the time of episode 606's completion, when Finn Shelby is excommunicated from the Peaky Blinders by Duke. He passionately states that he's going to come for him. Although Tommy chose a path of peace at series end, the diabolical Mosley is still out there. And a bit more of a deep cut, Jimmy McCavern, the leader of the brutal Billy Boys, secondary antagonists of the penultimate season, stated he would ultimately murder Thomas Shelby, which of course never came to fruition. In that same breath, I had a conversation the day before I went to see The Immortal Man at the cinema, in which I said that there's certainly a possibility where none of these loose ends are tied up, and the movie's brilliant. And spoiler alert, that was precisely the case. And I had that inkling in the first place for the simple reason that while the show's story is serialized, it builds and unravels gradually throughout the seasons, Peaky Blinders contains one particular episodic element in the antagonist department. While Inspector Campbell is the primary foe through seasons 1 and 2, season 1's secondary antagonist is Billy Kimber, while season 2's secondary villain is Darby Sabini. Father Hughes is the main antagonist of season 3, while Luca Changretta is the main villain of season 4. And while Mr. Mosley is the overarching foe through the final 2 seasons, season 5, as I mentioned earlier, features the Billy Boys as secondary antagonists, while in season 6, Michael kind of shares top billing in the villain department. He may even surpass Mosley in that regard, Jack Nelson being another central antagonistic force through the final batch of episodes. And these periodic villain-centric shifts feel quite organic and fresh, in large part due to the show's relatively frequent and effective time jumps. So then, what was it that I even subconsciously wanted from this 2026 film? What was it that was going to make this feature personally satisfying? A few things, I suppose. I mean, the show is technically elite, so I at least wanted the direction, production design, cinematography, etc. to be on par with it. I needed the movie to justify its own existence. By the time the film concluded, I wanted it to feel necessary, that the story continued beyond the television series finale, as was the case with the El Camino movie, which was released years after the critically hailed conclusion of Breaking Bad. And lastly, and this is kind of difficult to quantify, I needed The Immortal Man to recreate the spirit of the series. I needed to feel as though I had stepped right back into this world, for the atmosphere to feel familiar, but not too familiar. When I exited the theater, I immediately raved to my father about the array of impressive feats the team behind this film accomplished. The movie is just under the 2-hour mark, so it needs to be exciting and eventful, but not too fast-moving, as in so many of my favorite Peaky moments, a great amount of time is taken as we extensively hold on a given shot, for example. Another element of the series that I absolutely dug was the fact that while original compositions are present throughout the show, there are also a multitude of always effective needle drops, with artists such as Radiohead, Arctic Monkeys, and the White Stripes being featured. And this brilliant and unconventional combination, given the time period during which the show's events take place, is perfectly and authentically emulated in The Immortal Man. A trio of returning characters whom I believe truly represent the spirit of the show consists of Packy Lee's Johnny Dogs, Ian Peck's Curly, and Ned Dennehy's Charlie. Johnny Dogs, in particular, gets to shine in this motion picture. He really plays the part of Tommy's lone, loyal, right-hand man who happens to be effortlessly charismatic and funny, while the lovable Curly and Charlie continue to be the loyal soldiers that they were throughout the television series. This flick is excellently structured. The primary basic plot is simultaneously captivating and cohesive. At the heart of the Nazi Germany-centric story is the picture's main antagonist, Beckett, portrayed by the talented Tim Roth. Roth really is a blast here, and he also seems to be having one. He is, to put it quite simply, the embodiment of facetiousness. I mean, first and foremost, this bastard Beckett is fundamentally based in historical evil, so he's inherently hateable, while his personality is dead intriguing. He's quietly quirky, as I just alluded to. He's nonchalant in the most murderous of situations, and he does substantial damage. He's not only the man behind the death of Ada Shelby, he also manages to fire a few bullets into the gut of the titular immortal man. Beckett is, as is the case with any brilliant character, central to the story. He's soulless and manipulative in the sense that he's deliberately trying to play the role of daddy to Duke, who of course has become practically estranged from his quote-unquote father. I mean, Duke's deep resentment toward Thomas is entirely justified, though I do very much like where we end up with this character, who decided to choose his father over filthy fortune, ultimately utilizing the prophesied Tommy inscribed bullet to end his dad's life mercifully. And it felt more so satisfying that Tommy ends up dying as peacefully as he could, really, given what he had gotten himself into, at the hands of his son, rather than the villainous, racist prick Beckett. And something that's so great about the writing and the performances that depict it is that while I could always sense this pain and vulnerability behind Duke's eyes, I was never 100% certain of which side he would ultimately choose until he actually made said choice. I love a concise film that is so sure of the story it is telling, while its themes are ever present and ever prevalent through each solitary scene. This feature deals in such themes as legacy, those who create it and those impacted by it, the past, learning to confront it, then reconcile with it, family, its vast importance and our exceedingly complex and complicated relationship with it, as well as trauma and its immense power. Legacy is in relation to Thomas and his son Duke, the central dynamic of the film. The past is practically embodied in Rebecca Ferguson's Cowlo, twin sister of Tommy's first love before the war, Zelda. Family is of course in relation to Ada and all of the ghosts of Shelby's past, while trauma, the PTSD from the First World War, is more so practical. It's more prevalent in the action in the picture's latter portion, whilst Tommy is flooded with flashbacks when tunneling, in the vein of the excellent season 3 finale, though Tommy as a character is, of course, facing those decades-old demons every second of the day. This movie has been critically acclaimed, and I suppose mostly liked by the audience. I prefer to stay on the critical, non-Reddit side of the street in that department, but I did, at some point, see an article headline that was simply inevitable in regard to "this felt like an extra long episode." Well, the excellent series finale was slightly under the 90-minute mark in duration, while this excellent movie comes in just under the 120-minute mark. So yeah, I mean, it sort of is the case, and that basically is what I wanted. I mean, technically, am I wrong? Though there are a couple instances where the action is more cinematic than ever, and it doesn't feel out of place. It's brilliant. The dogfight POV near the picture's beginnings is extremely cool, as is the fucking massive climactic boat-centric explosion in a far more refreshingly quaint regard. The pigsty shootout is great fun, as is the bit in which Duke and his father wrestle in the mud and shit. It's so raw and clumsy, messy, literally, simple, but extremely effective. This bit also kind of sadly reminded me of the season 1 combat material between Arthur and he and Tommy's biological father, and in both instances we're dealing with pretty piss-poor dads. I was anticipating fantastic performances, and that is precisely what I was provided. I've learned it's completely impossible for Oscar winner Cillian Murphy to deliver anything less than a great performance. He's effortlessly compelling in each and every one of his roles. Barry Keoghan does a lovely job in this Duke Shelby recast. His performance is very intriguing, so often outwardly stoic like his pop, while thankfully in moments of intense contemplation, the camera assures to really hold on his performance. When his character is experiencing inner turmoil, it really highlights the truly palpable conflict within this character. Tommy's son, the new ruthless leader of the Peaky Blinders, is the reason Mr. Shelby is pulled back into the fold, if that's a term people use. All of this is assisted by Ferguson's character, who is technically Duke's aunt, a gypsy type a la the late Polly Gray. Now, sadly, I read this Peaky-centric article consisting of an interview with the sensational Tom Hardy, during which he alluded to the presence of the great Alfie Solomons in the 2026 picture, but no such luck. Though his absence logically makes sense, the story at hand doesn't necessarily call for him. Someone who did technically play a central role in the narrative was the sensational Stephen Graham's Hayden Stagg, who we were introduced to in the show's final season, and his mere presence is always an absolute treat. He's one of my all-time favorite actors, but I wish we were given a bit more of him. Now, a concept that certainly played a part throughout the series was that of true freedom / peace, and it is exceedingly present and prevalent within this film. Tommy was mentally tortured as a result of the Great War. There are multiple times when he and his comrades' PTSD is addressed. Tommy has described his brain as rotting, infected from the battle. At series' end, Tommy decides to abide by the rule of armistice. Even while the nefarious Mosley is on the newspaper's front page, Thomas chooses peace, torches his past before departing into the sunset atop a white horse. What this movie essentially tells us is that the only path to peace and true freedom for him is death. And we could see this in the series too, really. This man desperately wants to be put out of his misery, and a deeply regrettable decision he made only enhanced that fact. Which brings us to this story's most controversial, quite shocking story element, which I will now address in rather rambly fashion. We learn quite early on that between the series' end and the movie's commencement, Arthur Shelby passes away. It was officially pronounced a self-inflicted, drug-induced accident, which was sadly believable, but eventually Tommy confesses the fucking brutal truth to a deceased Ada. Tommy, in a rage and alcohol-fueled fog, strangled his brother to death. Now, when this was revealed, my mouth was fucking agape. While I was so sure of my adoration toward literally every other component of this flick, this is a story point that I'm still processing. I'm conflicted. The strength of family and loyalty to it was such an important component of the show. I mean, if before I had seen the movie you told me that Tommy murdered Arthur, I simply wouldn't believe it. And it's deliberately brutal. Tommy fucking chokes the life out of his brother, and he even mentions that he had a chance to spare his life, but he didn't. He even admits that this wasn't an act of mercy. Tommy states that he wanted to be free of his brother. Now, something I can certainly appreciate is that this was certainly a choice, and a bold, ballsy one at that. Definitely interesting. But the question is, would Thomas Shelby do that? Arthur certainly has been a burden to him, but I mean, I straight up would be very anti this particular plot line if Tommy's killing of Arthur was a premeditated, calculated thing. This was, as he mentions, a fit of rage, which ultimately broke him, what was left of him. And I mean, scarily enough, rage-filled fits during which an individual is killed by a close family member is nothing new in the real world. But am I trying to rationalize it because I love the series and so much of the movie a ridiculously great deal? I honestly don't think so. If something bumps me, something bumps me. And this particular plot point, I mean, it fucking floored me. I didn't feel anger at this revelation. I was in disbelief. I don't know. It's hard for me to articulate my feelings toward it. Do I buy it? I think so. I mean, it broke Tommy, and of course it would. It's very deliberately, specifically, sort of vaguely shown, all the flashback material. But that makes sense, given the heavily altered state these two men were in. And we only see the night's events while they're being recollected by Tommy. Now, I've read something about certain personal issues the sensational Paul Anderson was dealing with, which prohibited major involvement from him. But while the passing of other characters like Jeremiah, for example, are referenced, but don't necessarily play a part in the story at hand, Arthur's death is rather pertinent. Tommy visits Arthur's grave quite frequently. He is notably intent when Rebecca Ferguson's Gypsy Cowlow claims to be able to channel the deceased Arthur's messages for Tom. Plus, when it's first brought up to him, Tommy recounts essentially a fake rendition of that fateful night, while he ultimately confesses the truth of what happened to Ada's body before leaving in tears as he embarks on his final adventure. And this may be personally inferred. I got the vibe that while Tommy was certainly avenging Ada in this last big plot, he also wanted to pay tribute to his late brother. Me, Tommy killed his brother Arthur. This still blows my mind. Again, I'm not angered. I don't refuse to believe it. I just... wow. All in all, I thought this movie was absolutely fantastic. It was a delight to see the return of so many classic characters from the show, while the additions are brilliant, integral to the captivating story being told. I can't wait to watch it for a second, then third, etc. time on Netflix, and I'm honestly intrigued to see if I ever end up forming a concrete opinion on this sensational flick's unequivocally most controversial component.